October 29th, 2024. Just after finishing a live Facebook interview with Uruapan's mayor, 25-year-old journalist Mauricio Cruz Solis walked out into the night, unaware that cartel gunmen were lying in wait, determined to change the course of his life for the worse. Here are cartel victims who captured their final moments. March 18, 2021, a convoy of police trucks passed through the mountain roads of Coatepec de Harinas. Moments later, gunfire tore the silence apart as 13 officers were trapped in a cartel kill zone, with their final moments ending in violence. It was supposed to be a routine patrol in the mountain roads of Coatepec de Harinas, state of Mexico. 13 seasoned officers, some state police, some investigators from the Attorney General's office, loaded into trucks and SUVs. They didn't know it, but they were driving straight into one of the most calculated cartel ambushes in recent Mexican history. The trap was set. Gunmen had studied the route. They blocked off escape points and lay in wait. These weren't random street thugs. This was cartel warfare at its most disciplined. When the convoy reached Llano Grande, chaos erupted. High-caliber rifles, bursts of automatic fire, and armored trucks closing in. And within seconds, the officers were surrounded and outgunned. People nearby said the shooting could be heard miles away. Witnesses described hearing one volley after another, like thunder rolling through the valleys. By the time it was over, 13 officers lay dead, their vehicles riddled with bullets, and the pavement stained with blood. Survivors from nearby towns swore they heard short, methodical bursts of gunfire, as if each officer was finished off to make sure no one survived. Proof that in cartel territory, mercy is never part of the equation. And for the men behind the ambush, this wasn't just an attack, it was a message. You see, the state of Mexico is a strategic cartel ground, a corridor coveted for its highways leading to Guerrero, Morelos, and Mexico City itself. For years, rival groups, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, remnants of La Familia Michoacana, and smaller splinter cells, had fought over the region. The ambush was a clear demonstration that the cartels, not the government, controlled these roads. After the tragic incident, news broke fast, and by evening the massacre was on every Mexican front page, and international outlets were picking it up. Gunmen kill 13 in ambush on police convoy. The country was no stranger to violence, but this one hit hard. It wasn't civilians caught in crossfire, nor was it an isolated shootout. This was a direct assault on the state itself, carried out with military precision. Officials scrambled, helicopters hovered over the mountains, and convoys of soldiers poured into Coatepec de Harinas. Governor Alfredo Del Mazo called it a cowardly attack and vowed it would not go unpunished. But the damage was done. The people of Coatepec had already seen what the cartels wanted them to see, that 13 armed officers could be slaughtered in broad daylight, without warning, without consequence, at least in the moment. For the families of the fallen, the promises rang hollow. 13 funerals followed, each casket draped in the Mexican flag, each eulogy filled with the same words: honor, sacrifice, and justice. But even in grief, there was fear. Everyone knew the cartels would be watching, ready to strike again if the government pushed too hard. The ambush shook Mexico's police forces to the core. Officers go out each day knowing they are targets, that their vests and rifles mean little when ambushes like Coatepec are waiting in the shadows. To this day, Coatepec de Harinas carries the weight of that massacre. 13 men never came home, and the cartel left its signature behind. Fear carved into the landscape, and a question that still hangs heavy. How do you fight an enemy that moves like a shadow and strikes like an army? Because in Coatepec, the answer that day was simple and brutal: you don't. August 11th, 2023, 5 college friends posed for a quick photo in Lagos de Moreno, laughing beneath a mural that read, Pueblo Mágico. Hours later, they vanished. Days later, a cartel video revealed their horrifying fate as Mexico watched in shock. The victims were young: Roberto Olmeida, Diego Lara, Jaime Miranda, Uziel Olmeida, and Dante Hernandez. They weren't cartel members. They weren't rivals. They were just 5 friends who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, in one of Mexico's most violent states. That night, they stopped to take a group photo near a decorative mural that read, Lagos de Moreno, Pueblo Mágico. It was supposed to be a memory. Instead, it became the last picture of them alive. Hours later, families realized something was wrong as none of the boys came home. Their phones went silent and panic spread. By the next morning, Jalisco state prosecutors were already talking about a suspected cartel abduction. Then came the video. It surfaced online days later, spreading like wildfire across Mexico. The footage showed the 5 students tied up, beaten, and forced to fight each other with makeshift weapons. Their captors filmed the brutality with the cold calculation cartels are infamous for, turning murder into propaganda. At one point, one of the boys was forced to murder his own friend. For the families, the video was hell. They begged the public not to share it, but in the digital age, that plea was impossible to enforce. The images circulated everywhere, even mainstream news broadcasts. Parents had to watch the last moments of their sons over and over again, stripped of dignity and turned into content. But why did it happen? The Jalisco New Generation Cartel was locked in an escalating conflict with rivals like the Sinaloa Cartel and splinter groups in Guanajuato and Michoacan. Cartels thrive on terror. They don't just kill, they stage their violence to send a message. And abducting 5 normal kids and broadcasting their torture was never about those boys personally. It was about fear and reminding the entire state that the CJNG ruled Lagos de Moreno. The case shook Mexico, with public protests and students marching with photos of the 5 friends. Even churches held vigils. Politicians condemned the killings, but the families weren't impressed. They accused authorities of failing to protect their children and of losing the battle for Jalisco's streets. Despite national outrage, answers have been scarce. Authorities have announced investigations, raids, and arrests, but nothing has brought the families closure. The bodies of the 5 students were never officially recovered, though evidence suggests they were killed the night they were forced to fight each other. For their families, the absence of remains is another wound that won't heal. The Lagos de Moreno tragedy stands out even in a country where cartel violence is routine. It wasn't a targeted hit on rival gang members. It was 5 ordinary young men, studying, laughing, dreaming about the future, cut down in the cruelest way possible, and the world got to watch. Today, the mural where they took that last photo has become a site of mourning with flowers, candles, and handwritten notes covering the spot. People stop to pray, and others take photos to remember them. Lagos de Moreno was already a dangerous city, but after August 2023, its name became synonymous with one of the most disturbing cartel crimes in recent memory.
Pareciera que hay compromisos muy fuertes entre el gobierno y este líder criminal y va a seguir habiendo muertes puesto que no quieren actuar como debe de ser.
On March 2nd, 2017, a Facebook live stream played on dozens of phones in Tierra Caliente, Guerrero, as journalist Cecilio Pineda Berto lay back in a hammock at a car wash, talking about local politics, corruption, and cartel violence. Minutes later, the video cut out. At first, viewers thought it was a bad connection, but then hours later, they learned the truth. Pineda had been murdered. Cecilio was a 38-year-old local reporter who lived right where the violence happened, covering crime in one of Mexico's most dangerous regions. And his specialty was exposing cartel activity and the politicians who looked the other way. But that day, his Facebook Live had been about Los Tequileros, a violent criminal group infamous for extortion and drug trafficking in Guerrero. Pineda had been reporting on them for years, calling them out openly in a place where even police refused to say their name aloud. On camera, he accused local authorities of protecting cartel leaders instead of fighting them. It was bold and reckless, and it was exactly the kind of work that made him a target. But this wasn't the first attempt on his life. In 2015, gunmen tried to kill him outside his home. He survived, but instead of staying quiet, he became louder. He told friends and colleagues he would never stop exposing the truth, no matter how much danger it put him in. That March evening, his enemies finally caught up to him. Not long after he finished his live stream, 2 men on a motorcycle pulled into the car wash and shot him multiple times before fleeing. His Facebook Live didn't capture the actual attack, but the abrupt cutoff, followed by the flood of reports, created a chilling effect. For a moment, people thought they had witnessed his execution live. Authorities arrived quickly, but as with so many cartel killings, their response led nowhere, with no arrests and no convictions. Suspects were said to be connected to Los Tequileros, but Guerrero's justice system was crippled by corruption and fear, because in cartel territory, silence was the rule, and impunity was the outcome. But the most tragic part? Pineda had asked for protection from the Mexican government after the 2015 assassination attempt. He knew the risk he faced, but officials rejected his request, saying he didn't qualify for state protection. And 2 years later, their decision proved fatal. His murder rattled Mexico's press corps. He wasn't the first journalist killed that year, and he wouldn't be the last. 2017 became one of the deadliest years on record for reporters in Mexico, with at least 12 killed. Pineda's case stood out not just because of who he was, but because of how public it felt. His Facebook Live, his words, and then his silence made his death impossible to ignore. Today, his Facebook page remains frozen in time. People still leave comments under his last video, some tributes, some warnings, all reminders of the risk he took by speaking. His story is a symbol of a grim reality that in parts of Mexico, telling the truth is a death sentence.
nombre es Carlos Enrique Sánchez Martínez, alias El Cholo, originario de Guadalajara, Jalisco. Me encuentro en esta situación por ser contra del CJNG.
March 18th, 2021, a video began circulating with a man in a red shirt who was handcuffed and surrounded by masked gunmen as he stared into the camera and said his name, El Cholo. At that moment, viewers knew instantly that whatever came next would not end well. Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez was once a trusted lieutenant inside the powerful Jalisco New Generation Cartel. He had earned his place through years of loyalty and violence, climbing the ranks until his name carried weight in Guadalajara's underworld. But his ambition would eventually set him on a collision course with the very cartel that made him. Back in 2017, El Cholo did something unthinkable. He ordered the execution of a senior CJNG operator known as El Colombiano, accusing him of betrayal. That single act shattered his relationship with the CJNG leadership and sent shockwaves through the organization. Rather than lie low, El Cholo split away and joined forces with old enemies, helping to form the Nueva Plaza Cartel. It wasn't just a split, it was an open war. The battles that followed left Guadalajara stained with blood. Shootouts, ambushes, and targeted killings became almost routine as both cartels fought for control. In the midst of all these, El Cholo gained a reputation for being bold, ruthless, and unpredictable, but he also became a marked man. For the CJNG, betrayal was the highest crime, and they were patient enough to wait for the perfect time to strike back. By 2021, that time had come. The video of El Cholo wasn't just a hostage recording, it was theater, meant to humiliate him and terrify everyone watching. In it, he took responsibility for several major attacks, including massacres in Tonalá, Tlajomulco, and Tlaquepaque, as well as an attack on the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara. He even named government officials and police figures, claiming they had secretly supported him. What made the video even more chilling was his demeanor. He wasn't panicked, nor did he beg for mercy. He spoke steadily, almost as if he was reading from a script, fully aware that these were his final words to the world. The next morning, people in Tlaquepaque awoke to a gruesome scene. In Jardín Hidalgo, a public square, lay a black plastic-wrapped bundle. When police pulled it open, they found El Cholo's body, tortured, beaten, and mutilated. His end had been as violent as the life he lived. An autopsy later revealed the extent of the brutality. His ribs were broken, his body showed signs of prolonged torture, and his captors had clearly made him suffer before killing him. It was a punishment, a warning to anyone thinking of betraying the CJNG. For years, El Cholo had tried to play both sides of Mexico's cartel war. He believed he could split from the CJNG, build his own power base, and carve out a lasting empire. For a while, he managed it. But in cartel politics, there's no forgiveness for betrayal, and there's no retirement plan. His public confession, followed by his public dumping, was a carefully staged lesson. You don't cross the CJNG and live to tell the story. From feared cartel boss to humiliated captive, his death became another entry in the bloody ledger of Mexico's drug war. May 11th, 2025, a Facebook live stream showed Yesenia Lara Gutierrez smiling in her campaign vest, leading a caravan in Veracruz. But moments later, gunfire erupted with the screen blurring, screams echoing, and the broadcast of her final moments cut to black. Yesenia, a 49-year-old teacher-turned-politician, had just wrapped up a rally in Texas Tepec. Her campaign wasn't about grand national promises. It was about running water, electricity, and better roads. Things her neighbors had been waiting on for decades. She wasn't an outsider parachuting in for votes. She was from there. She taught local kids, worked in the bank, and served as a municipal official. People around knew her, and that's why she had supporters marching with her that night, clapping and waving flags as she smiled into her phone. But then came the ambush. Reports say at least 8 armed men struck. Shots cracked across the street as the crowd scattered in panic. And in those few chaotic seconds, her campaign turned into carnage. 4 people lay dead, including Yesenia, with at least 3 others who were wounded. Her live stream, just minutes earlier, filled with laughter and chants, captured the first terrifying moments. By the time security forces arrived, the gunmen were gone. Soldiers and police found Yesenia lying in the street with her body covered with a Morena flag, the same banner she had carried into neighborhoods as a promise of change. Now it was a shroud, or Veracruz officials called it what it was: political violence. Yesenia's husband had been killed under violent circumstances back in 2022, a tragedy that many thought would scare her off from public life. But instead, it seemed to harden her resolve. She stepped forward, determined to represent her community, even knowing how dangerous the political arena in Mexico had become. That courage made her a target. The governor of Veracruz condemned the killing within hours. President Sheinbaum echoed the outrage, promising justice. Investigators moved quickly, and within weeks, they announced the arrest of 2 suspects, with one of them being accused of pulling the trigger. But in Mexico, arrests rarely guarantee convictions. And even if they did, justice doesn't really fill the void left behind. For Texas Stepek, the loss was devastating. People gathered in vigils, holding candles, praying, and placing flowers where she fell. They remembered her as a teacher who never stopped caring about the kids she taught, a local official who never looked down on her neighbors, and a woman who really believed she could fix what was broken. Her supporters spoke about the water pipes she wanted to repair and the roads she promised to pave. But those dreams now seemed buried with her. The violence surrounding her death wasn't isolated. In that same election season, multiple candidates across Veracruz were threatened, attacked, or killed. Running for office in cartel-dominated regions had become less about policy and more about survival. People even whispered that in certain parts of the country, politics wasn't a contest of ideas. It was a battlefield. And Yesenia, like too many before her, paid the ultimate price. Her story was meant to be about progress, about a school teacher who decided to step up and fight for her community. Yesenia Lara Gutierrez's final moments played out on a live stream for the world to see. She wanted people to hear her voice. Instead, they heard the gunshots that ended it.
Que pues la ubicación donde se encontraban los chapos.
¿Y a quién se la mandabas esa información?
A Lupe Campos y Noé Campos, integrantes del Cartel MF.
January 10th, 2025, a phone captured El Pinky, bloodied, bound, and trembling. Forced words spilled out as masked men loomed off screen. He knew it, and viewers knew it too, that his end was coming. The victim was Agustin Paul, better known online as El Pinky, a 22-year-old comedic YouTuber from Culiacan. He had built a following with pranks, skits, and lighthearted content, pulling in nearly 100,000 subscribers. Just days earlier, he had posted a hopeful New Year's message, talking about leaving bad people behind and starting fresh. But in Sinaloa, a clean slate is rarely an option, especially when the cartels think you've crossed them. The warning signs appeared one day before his death. Flyers were scattered across Culiacan, listing names of local influencers accused of working with La Mayiza, a rival faction challenging the powerful Los Chapitos. El Pinky's name was right there on the paper. To most, it looked like a death list, and it certainly was. The next morning, his body was found along La Costerita, a highway outside Culiacan. He had been tortured, with his hands and feet tied behind him. His face was battered, and a gunshot wound to the head sealed his fate. Then a video surfaced. The footage, shot in the hours before his death, spread quickly across social media. It showed El Pinky sitting shirtless, bloodied, his eyes wide with fear under the harsh glare of a flashlight. His voice shook as he confessed to working with Mayito Flaco, a figure tied to a rival cartel. He even admitted passing along information about Los Chapitos' movements, hoping to be rewarded with money, cars, and even a house. But the promises never materialized. Instead, the betrayal caught up with him. It was the forced confession of a young man who knew the end was seconds away. For the cartels, it wasn't enough to kill him. They wanted the video to send a message. Betrayal would not be tolerated. And thanks to social media, their message reached far beyond the streets of Culiacan. Fans who once laughed at his pranks were left horrified. Social networks were filled with grief, anger, and disbelief. Some wondered how deeply he had really been involved with the cartels. Others pointed to the brutal reality in Mexico. Influencers and public figures often become pawns, pressured or coerced into the game. And once you're in, there's rarely a way out. El Pinky's death wasn't an isolated event. In recent years, influencers across Mexico have been targeted, some for flaunting cartel-linked wealth, others for allegedly taking sides in rival wars. A few were caught up simply because of who they knew or where they lived. The details vary, but the outcome is the same. Public, brutal deaths used to spread fear. For Culiacan, the killing hit hard. El Pinky wasn't a cop, a journalist, or a rival enforcer. He was supposed to be safe from this kind of fate. Yet the line between entertainment and cartel violence blurred fatally for him. His story became another reminder that, in a place where suspicion rules, even laughter can get you killed. October 29, 2024, minutes after interviewing Uruapan's mayor live on Facebook, 25-year-old journalist Mauricio Cruz Solis stepped into the night. What he didn't know was that cartel gunmen were already waiting, ready to silence him before his voice grew louder. For those who knew him, Mauricio was young, ambitious, and determined to carve a name for himself in journalism. At just 25 years old, he had already built a noticeable presence in Uruapan, Michoacan, one of the most dangerous regions in Mexico for reporters. He ran the digital outlet Minuto X Minuto Michoacan, contributed to other local newspapers like ABC de Michoacan and La Opinión de Michoacan, and had a voice on the radio through his news program, La Poderosa Uruapan. He wasn't a veteran reporter with decades of experience, as he was still rising and still experimenting, but he understood the risk of reporting in a city where organized crime dominated daily life. But that didn't stop him. In fact, his ambition pushed him into even riskier territory. Mauricio wanted journalism that wasn't confined to offices, newsrooms, or closed studios. He believed information belonged to the public, out in the open, and in the streets. This idea shaped a project he was preparing to launch, La Jiribilla Nightchow. It was going to be a public broadcast, recorded in open spaces where ordinary people could gather, watch, and hear about the issues affecting them. It was bold and unconventional, and in Michoacan, it was dangerous. Mauricio often used Facebook Live to engage with his audience. It was simple, and it gave him direct contact with viewers. But it also carried exposure. Everyone could see where he was, what he was doing, and when he was doing it. In a city crawling with cartel lookouts, that kind of visibility could quickly turn deadly. That night in October, Mauricio had just wrapped up what seemed like a routine interview. He sat down with Uruapan's mayor, talking about public safety, ironically, one of the city's biggest problems. Eventually, the broadcast ended, his viewers logged off, and the conversation was over. But outside, danger was already waiting. As Mauricio and a colleague moved through downtown Uruapan near the Casa de la Cultura, men with guns appeared. The attack was fast, violent, and impossible to escape. Mauricio was shot multiple times before he had a chance to react. His colleague survived with injuries, but Mauricio died on the spot. The assassination triggered outrage across Mexico. Fellow journalists in Michoacan, already living under constant threats, reacted with fury and fear. Condemnations poured in from organizations like Reporters Without Borders, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the UN's Human Rights Office. UNESCO's Director General Audrey Azoulay demanded accountability, while Amnesty International warned state authorities not to brush this off as anything less than an attack on press freedom. On the streets, the anger grew louder. Journalists, family members, and citizens marched in protest, carrying Mauricio's name on signs and shouting, "Ni uno más," which translates to, "Not one more." The marches were both tribute and warning. Killing a journalist doesn't kill the truth. It only proves how desperate criminals are to control it. Michoacan's governor, Alfredo Ramirez Bedolla, promised justice. "The one who does it pays for it," he declared. The state attorney general's office launched an investigation, joined by the federal special prosecutor for crimes against freedom of expression. Within weeks, at least one suspect was arrested. Still, many remained skeptical. In Mexico, too many journalist murders end in silence, with trials stalling and suspects slipping away. Mauricio's murder wasn't the first in Michoacan, and sadly, it wouldn't be the last. At 25, Mauricio Cruz Solis represented a younger generation of reporters testing new platforms, refusing to play it safe, and trying to speak directly to their communities. For that, he was silenced. His death robbed his family of a son and his city of a voice.